Colossal question.
Why do chimps fling their poop around? Our hairy friends from the animal kingdom are well known for their smelly habit of tossing their fresh feces at unsuspecting bystanders. This might seem like the dumbest possible thing a monkey could do, but there is a reason for it. You see, chimp experts say that poo flinging isn't nearly as common in the wild. Chimps roaming free still like to throw things when they're scared, annoyed, or anxious, but they tend to stick to rocks and sticks. Chimps at zoos or in wildlife sanctuaries tend to have fewer things around to throw, so, being practical primates, they throw whatever they have in easy supply, and that means poop. But chimps don't just throw poop because it's plentiful. Over time, they begin to realize that throwing their poop gets a much bigger reaction than throwing just about anything else. In fact, these prankster primates have even been documented pooping in their hand and waiting for someone to bother them. Now, you might think that it's just the immature monkeys who would throw their poo, but that's actually not the case. Chimps who have better aim when flinging feces tend to have more brain development in their motor cortex, the part that controls physical motion, which you might expect. But they also tend to have much more developed frontal cortex too, which helps process language, meaning they were slightly smarter, more developed, and better communicators. So, next time you see a chimpanzee hurl its poop across a cage in your general direction, just remember, he's not doing it because he's dumb, he's trying to send you a warning. Do bees die after a sting? There are all kinds of bees buzzing out there in the world. Bumblebees, honeybees, carpenter bees, yellow jackets, wasps, and hornets, just to name a few that you may have heard of. But it turns out that only one species of bee can actually die from stinging you, the honeybee. And it happens to them for a, well, kinda gruesome reason. You see, a honeybee's stinger is barbed and doesn't exactly stab, but screws into your flesh like a corkscrew, driving their whole stinger into your skin and injecting a venom called apitoxin. But this isn't some sort of strange last-ditch suicide sting. Honeybees can pull their stinger out of other insects and most other animals. But mammal skin is thick and made of tiny little fibers that tend to tangle up the barbs on the bee's stinger. When the bee tries to pull away after corkscrew stabbing you, its stinger gets caught in our skin and it's ripped right out of the bee's abdomen as it tries to fly away. But even after accidentally killing itself, the bee isn't done doing damage. A bee stinger can keep shooting venom into your body for up to 10 minutes if you don't remove it. Sometimes, a honeybee will survive a stinging if the person being stung has thin skin that doesn't quite hold the barbed stinger in place. But since a honeybee's stinger is designed to dig as deep as possible, well, that doesn't tend to happen too often. In a honeybee hive, female worker bees are actually the only ones who can sting. In fact, male honeybees don't even have stingers. So, do bees actually die when they sting you? Well, honeybees do. They just don't mean to. So, if you see a bee buzzing about, it's best to just keep your distance and let it do its thing. You really don't want to get stung, and it's safe to assume the bees aren't looking to rip themselves apart either. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Right off the bat, this seems like an easy answer. The chicken. No, the egg. No, wait. The chicken needs to, but the egg can't. Okay, so maybe this one isn't obvious. Over the years, many cultures have tried to solve this dilemma. In the Middle Ages, some Europeans believed that the chicken must have come first, since according to their beliefs, God created birds before he created eggs. But some ancient texts wrote it the opposite. They believed in a cosmic egg, or world egg, that the sky, earth, and all of existence hatched from. Now, few people today think the earth was hatched out of an egg, but if you ask most biologists, they'll tell you the egg did in fact come first. Sort of. around 300 million years ago, reptiles became the first living things on Earth to lay eggs. It took another 100 million years or so for birds to arrive on the scene, and by then, animals had been laying eggs for millions of years. So eggs did come first, just not chicken eggs. Not satisfied by that answer? Neither am I. So let's finally put this to rest. Which came first, the chicken or the chicken egg? Well, according to Robert Krulwich of NPR, the egg came first. Here's why. A long time ago, there was a chicken-like bird. It was very, very similar to a chicken, but not quite chicken-like enough to be considered, well, a chicken. Two of these chicken-like birds had an egg together, and the genes in that egg mutated just enough to change it into a new species that today we call a chicken. So, two non-chickens laid a mutated egg that was the very first chicken egg in history. That egg hatched into the world's very first chicken, and voila, an age-old question answered. Now go impress your friends with that one. Why do pigs love mud so much? It might seem like pigs play in the mud just to get as dirty as they can, but it actually serves a specific function. It helps keep them cool. You see, as humans, we sweat whenever our bodies get too hot in the sun. As that sweat evaporates, it cools the skin to help keep us at around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's humans. Unfortunately, pigs don't have nearly as many sweat glands as we do, and the ones they do have aren't very powerful. That means pigs can't sweat enough to keep themselves cool in the sweltering sun. So, what do hogs do on a hot day to keep from overheating? You guessed it! They roll, splash, and play in some nice, cool mud. That's right! Pigs have found their own natural muddy way to protect their skin from the beating sun. In fact, mud can lower a pig's body temperature by more than 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it even more efficient than sweating is for humans. It works so well because it takes a long time for water to evaporate out of mud. A piglet's mud bath protects them much longer than if they just hopped in some cool water. When the mud finally dries on a pig's skin, it forms a crusty barrier against the sun. That dried dirt also keeps flies, mosquitoes, and other parasites from biting the pigs. All that muddy protection has given our poor, porky little friends a bit of a reputation for being dirty animals. But the truth is, they're actually pretty clean. For instance, unlike lots of other animals, pigs take pains to make sure they don't poop anywhere near where they eat or sleep. Given enough space, hogs will hide their bathroom as far away as they can. So, why do pigs like to roll in the mud? Because it keeps them cool and keeps them safe, and maybe most importantly, it honestly seems pretty fun. Why do horses wear shoes? Horseshoes aren't anything like the shoes we humans wear, and to be honest, they don't look all that comfortable. But if you're a horse, they actually help a ton. Since horses are giant, super heavy animals, their hooves need to be super strong to carry all that weight. A horse's thick hooves help protect their legs as they run around or carry heavy loads. They're made of a material called keratin, the same stuff that your hair and nails are made of. But us humans only have a very thin layer of keratin on our fingers and toes. Horse hooves are made of lots of thick layers of keratin put together that make them strong. But despite their strength, hooves still wear and tear naturally. To fix this, our ancient equine-owning ancestors started inventing ways to protect domestic horses' hooves from damage. And over time, the horseshoe as we know it became the standard. Okay, so all this makes sense, but what about wild horses? Why don't they have to wear shoes? Well, that has a lot to do with the different lifestyles of wild and domestic horses. Wild horses might travel up to 50 miles in a day looking for food, but most of that movement is done slowly. They only really need to run if they're being chased by a predator. They also tend to live in dry, flat places. Slowly walking around all day on flat ground means that wild horse hooves naturally wear out evenly, smoothly, and stay nice and hard. Domestic horses move much more inconsistently. They're often asked to carry or pull large amounts of weight like packs, riders, wagons, or sometimes all three. They work and live on soft ground like irrigated fields and stables, and once a horse gets back to their stall, there's only so much space to move around. All these factors combined wear on their hooves and make them much more likely to crack or split. So horses wear hooves for a lot of the same reasons we do, because it's really hard to walk around our modern world without shoes on. How do chameleons change color? Chameleons are colorful critters that can be found in all different colors in the wild. Green, blue, browns, and turquoise are common, but pink, orange, or red chameleons can be found too. There's over 160 different species of chameleon, and not all of them can change colors. They live all over the world, in the rainforests or deserts of Asia, Africa, Europe, and in North America, where they're mostly kept as household pets. You might think the chameleons change their colors to camouflage themselves from potential predators, but that's not always the case. It's certainly convenient to hide in plain sight, but chameleons are actually really fast and can outrun almost any predator. So the disguise helps, but experts believe it's actually not the main reason chameleons change their colors. Then what is? Believe it or not, chameleons most likely change color to reflect their emotions, kinda like they're a living, breathing mood ring. This can clue another chameleon in and send signals to each other about how they're feeling. Darker colors tend to mean a chameleon is getting angry, and bright, colorful hues are used to attract a mate. There can be plenty of practical reasons for a chameleon to change colors too. On a hot day, they might become lighter to reflect heat away, and on a cold day, they would go darker to absorb more warmth. Okay, so those are the main reasons why chameleons change color, but how do they actually do it? Well, if you ask experts, a chameleon's color-changing ability is mostly due to special cells called iridophores underneath the skin. These cells work like millions of microscopic prisms and can move to reflect light waves different ways, creating all sorts of different colors. So, to close, chameleons use special cells in their skin to change colors, but not necessarily so they can hide. They just like to wear their emotions on their sleeves. What's the deadliest animal on Earth? We have lots of good candidates for deadliest animal on Earth. Take elephants, for example. They're the largest land animals on Earth and can be fiercely aggressive if provoked. They have no problem trampling people or other animals, or even entire villages when they're angry. And if that wasn't destructive enough, elephants also have excellent memories, which means they might even hold a grudge if they're really wronged. Hippos are another of Earth's most aggressive animals. Even though they mostly eat plants, hippos are huge and more than willing to fight, even for no reason at all. And yet the deadliest animal of them all is also one of the smallest: mosquitoes. These bothersome little bugs are so deadly because they can spread viruses from person to person when they suck your blood. Experts report that nearly 700 million people each year get a disease from a mosquito bite, which leads to somewhere between 2 and 3 million deaths. Malaria, dengue, and Zika are 3 of the many diseases that you can get from mosquito bites if you live in high-risk areas. But before you start building a bunker to hide in, there is some good news. Since the year 2000, medical advancements have led to an almost 40% drop in malaria deaths. And unless you live in certain areas, there's no real risk of getting a deadly disease. So next time you're on a safari, just keep a safe distance from the elephants and hippos, and definitely wear bug spray. Do horses sleep standing up? In the wild, horses almost always need to be on the lookout for potential attacking predators. That's because horses have straight backs, which makes it harder for them to get up off the ground quickly. This means that horses don't like sleeping on the ground where they're helpless if they're attacked. So instead, horses need to do most of their sleeping in broad daylight. Luckily, horses have special joints in their legs that let them lock their knees in place so they can fall asleep standing up without tipping over. So yes, horses can sleep standing up, and they do it all the time. But that also doesn't mean they never lie down. That's right. Unfortunately for horses, they might be able to take little cat naps while standing up, but in order to get deep, restful sleep, horses need to lay down like the rest of us. If you're ever at a stable and you see a group of horses laying down asleep, look around for one or more horses standing apart, keeping a watchful eye for predators while their friends sleep. The role of guardian horse rotates between the members of the group so that everyone can get enough rest. So, in other words, it's kinda like a big horsey slumber party. Why do birds sing in the morning? Bird scientists call that period in the early morning where seemingly every bird within earshot sings the dawn chorus. It starts around 4 a.m. and can last for several hours. Of course, birds sing all throughout the day, but during the dawn chorus, their songs tend to be louder, livelier, and much more frequent. According to experts, birds belt out their songs to attract a mate or warn other birds to steer clear of their territory. Basically like a beautiful sing-song version of "You Look Cute" or "Get Off My Branch." So those songs are less about crooning and much more about showing other birds just how fit and healthy you are. So that's why they sing, but why does it have to be so early in the morning? Well, experts aren't certain, but they do have a few ideas. The traditional theory is that in the darker hours of the early morning, birds can't do any of their other bird chores, like foraging for food. So they use that time to get their singing in instead. Another theory is that birds sing so early because it tends to be extra quiet, allowing their songs to travel further. Without all the hustle and bustle of the daytime, their songs would be easier for a mate to pick out. But both those theories have fallen out of favor in the last few years. Instead, many now believe it's much more about showing off just how fit and healthy they are. You see, birds do most of their feeding during the day, so first thing in the morning tends to be when they're the hungriest and weakest. Being able to belt out a song loud and proud proves to potential mates or threats that they're nice and strong. The louder they sing, the stronger they sound, which helps attract a mate. A nice loud song keeps other birds from trying to move into their territory and can make a tiny bird sound much bigger than they are. So, why do birds sing? For the same reason lots of us like to show off. To try and impress each other and seem as cool as they can. Pretty relatable. Why do sloths move around so slowly? Sloths are extra slow because of one simple thing: their diet. You see, sloths live high up in the branches of Central and South American forests, so they have tons of fruits, flowers, and leaves to eat from the treetops. That means their diet has little to no protein or fat, which is what helps give animals energy. So, sloths spend their whole lives trying to make sure they conserve their energy by moving slowly and as little as they can. But sloths do climb a bit better than they walk. An average sloth might only climb around 120 feet per day in the trees, but on ground, they can only move about a foot per minute. That's really slow. And as you might imagine, sloths digest their food just as slowly as they do everything else. You see, sloths don't have front teeth to chew up those leaves, so all they can really do is mash them up with their lips. That means it can take a sloth a full month to fully digest a meager meal of leaves and fruits. Because sloths don't move much and they burn so little energy, they usually only need to poop once a week. That might sound convenient at first, but it's definitely not. Sloths travel down to the forest floor to poop, which makes them way more vulnerable to predator attacks. Not only that, but pooping only once a week means, well, they really get backed up. An average sloth species can weigh about 1/3 of the poor pooping sloth's body weight. That's one giant, painful poop. So remember that the next time you see a smiling sloth lounging in a tree eating some fruit. It's all nice and relaxing until nature calls.